The quantum communication burst first arrived at 3:47 Galactic Standard Time, splitting through the carefully maintained communication networks like a digital sledgehammer. On the monitoring stations of a dozen different alien civilizations, alarms erupted simultaneously, a coincidence so statistically improbable that it would have been dismissed as impossible mere moments before. Zorakal, the lead cryptanalyst of the Vexenarian Imperial Communication Bureau, felt her three hearts simultaneously clench and race. The transmission defied every known principle of interstellar communication. Its quantum signature was impossible, a chaotic symphony of data that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, as if the very message itself was both a signal and noise, coherent and incomprehensible. "Analyze it again," she barked at her team of junior analysts, her translucent skin rippling with tension. The holographic displays around her flickered with fragments of the transmission, each replay revealing something new, yet explaining nothing. The first discernible element was a series of moving images. Creatures with fur, small, quadrupedal beings, appeared to be performing increasingly absurd actions. One image showed a feline creature pushing an object off a flat surface, accompanied by what the translation algorithms identified as laughter. Another depicted a similar creature wearing what appeared to be headgear with pointed protrusions, staring directly into a visual recording device, with an expression that seemed simultaneously challenging and completely disinterested. "These are military communications," insisted Krell9, the mechanical diplomatic analyst from the crystalline concordance. His robotic frame hummed with processing power as he attempted to decode the transmission. "Look at the precision of the image capture, the subtle communication of dominance and territory." Zorakal wasn't convinced. The creatures looked nothing like a strategic military unit. They appeared soft, inefficient, almost comically unprepared for any serious conflict. But then the transmission shifted. Sudden bursts of rapid-fire text appeared, what the systems identified as internet memes. Complex layers of cultural reference, multi-layered jokes, and what seemed to be deliberately nonsensical communication patterns began to emerge. Each layer of the transmission seemed designed to be simultaneously meaningful and meaningless. "It's a test," whispered Dr. Qian of the Quantum Communication Research Institute. Her species, known for their ability to perceive multiple dimensional realities, looked pale and shaken. "They're probing our communication systems, but not as an attack. More like a child exploring." The transmission originated from a small blue-green planet called Earth, a world that most galactic databases had previously marked as primitive and non-communicative. The very randomness of the transmission was its most terrifying feature. Traditional communication relied on structured protocols, predictable patterns. This was something else entirely. As alien analysis teams worked frantically, none of them noticed the most critical detail. The transmission was slowly, almost imperceptibly, exposing fundamental weaknesses in their own communication technologies. Firewalls crumbled. Encryption algorithms became transparent. The very act of attempting to understand the transmission was changing the systems trying to decode it. In a monitoring station orbiting a distant neutron star, a junior technician named Glink suddenly burst into uncontrollable laughter. On the screen before him, a transmission fragment showed what appeared to be a small furry creature wearing a shark costume, dancing to an incomprehensible rhythmic pattern. "Sir," Glink managed between fits of laughter, "I think we're in trouble." Somewhere on Earth, someone was uploading another cat video, completely unaware of the galactic panic they were about to unleash. The Galactic Diplomatic Consortium had spent 3 millennia perfecting the art of doing absolutely nothing. Elaborate protocols, intricate ceremonial procedures, and generations of carefully maintained tensions ensured that no meaningful change ever occurred. That is, until the humans arrived. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez looked nothing like a traditional diplomatic envoy. Her delegation consisted of 5 individuals who appeared to have been randomly selected from a city bus: a retired high school history teacher, a stand-up comedian, a quantum physicist with visible coffee stains on her lab coat, a professional soccer player, and Alina herself, a former community organizer with a habit of solving problems by bringing people together and buying them food. The first meeting was scheduled in the Grand Ceremonial Chamber of Neutral Space Station Omega-9, a location that had hosted exactly 4,722 diplomatic meetings without a single substantive resolution. The station's walls were lined with holographic representations of every species' most elaborate diplomatic costumes, except for the humans, who arrived in what appeared to be a mix of business casual and what one alien diplomat described as ritualistic comfort garments. Grand Coordinator Zilrak of the Crystalline Diplomatic Corps approached the human delegation, his 17 translucent appendages carefully arranged to convey maximum administrative importance. We will now begin the 7,334th iteration of the Preliminary Diplomatic Engagement Protocol, he intoned, his voice a precise mathematical frequency designed to induce formal listening. Alina interrupted him mid-sentence. "Anyone want coffee?" she asked, pulling out a portable espresso machine from what appeared to be an impossibly small bag. Chaos ensued. The stand-up comedian, Jack Mitchell, somehow found himself in a corner with the representatives of two species that had been in a Cold War for 3 centuries. Within 20 minutes, he had them both laughing so hard that they were accidentally holding hands, a gesture of peace entirely outside any known diplomatic manual. Dr. Sarah Chen, the quantum physicist, was deep in conversation with the scientific advisors of 3 different delegations. What started as a discussion about communication protocols devolved into an impromptu brainstorming session about solving a centuries-old energy distribution problem, using what appeared to be napkin sketches and increasingly elaborate coffee stain diagrams. The most shocking moment came when the retired history teacher, Frank Williams, casually mentioned a conflict resolution technique he'd used with high school debate clubs. The representatives of the Zorn Confederacy and the Liquid Thought Collective, who had been locked in a passive-aggressive standoff for generations, suddenly realized they could solve their territorial dispute over a seemingly insignificant gas giant. "It's just like managing a classroom," Frank said, shrugging. "Sometimes you just need to get people to actually listen to each other." Grand Coordinator Zilrak's carefully maintained diplomatic persona began to crack. His appendages twitched uncontrollably as he watched the humans systematically deconstruct millennia of diplomatic stagnation in less than 3 hours. By the end of the first day, 3 long-standing conflicts had been resolved. 2 species had initiated unprecedented cultural exchange programs, and the entire concept of diplomatic engagement had been fundamentally reimagined. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Alina Rodriguez turned to Zilrak. "Same time next week?" she asked, pulling out a thermos of what she claimed was the world's best coffee. Zilrak could only nod, his sophisticated communication systems completely overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human diplomacy. Somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of galactic politics, something fundamental had changed, and nobody was quite sure how or why. Dr. Aria Chen stood before the Galactic Technology Consortium. Her presentation slides a kaleidoscope of seemingly random diagrams, video game screenshots, and what appeared to be hastily scribbled napkin designs. The assembled alien scientists shifted uncomfortably in their seats, or equivalent postures of unease. "Quantum entanglement," she began, "is basically just advanced peekaboo." The translation algorithms worked overtime to convey the full complexity of her statement. Behind her, a holographic display flickered between complex mathematical equations and a 1980s arcade game screen. The breakthrough had come from an unlikely collaboration. 3 months earlier, a team of NASA engineers, a group of indie game developers, and a retired roller coaster designer had been sharing a particularly intense brainstorming session fueled by energy drinks and what they called creative chaos. What emerged was a transportation technology that defied every known principle of physics and common sense. Dr. Krulvax of the Andromeda Research Institute was the first to fully comprehend the implications. The human technology didn't just improve faster than light travel, it fundamentally reimagined the concept of movement itself. Using a combination of quantum mechanics, procedural generation algorithms from video game design, and what the humans casually referred to as thinking outside the box, they had created something unprecedented. The core of the technology was maddeningly simple. It treated space-time like a massive, infinitely complex video game level. Traditional alien faster-than-light systems were like carefully planned routes. The human system was more like a player who could clip through walls, create shortcuts, and fundamentally rewrite the game's rules while playing. "We call it the quantum drift engine," Arya explained, clicking to a slide that showed a diagram part scientific schematic, part Super Mario Bros. Level map. "Essentially, we've turned interstellar travel into the ultimate speedrun." The practical demonstration came without warning. A research facility that had been studying the technology suddenly found itself transformed. Quantum fluctuations began to manifest in ways that defied logical explanation. Walls became temporarily permeable. Gravity became a suggestion rather than a rule. A potted plant in the corner of the laboratory spontaneously began to play what sounded suspiciously like jazz music. Dr. Xan of the Crystalline Research Collective watched in horror and fascination as his most advanced quantum scanning equipment began to produce results that looked like abstract art. Equations that had taken generations to develop were being rewritten in real time, with what seemed like playful disregard for established scientific principles. The true genius and terror of the human approach was its complete lack of reverence for existing systems. Where alien technological development was a careful, methodical process, human innovation resembled controlled chaos. They didn't just push boundaries. They seemed unaware that boundaries existed in the first place. "By the way," Arya added as an afterthought, "we're pretty sure we can use this to solve the energy crisis, clean up environmental damage, and potentially create a really cool theme park ride." The Galactic Technology Consortium went silent. Several senior researchers found themselves experiencing what could only be described as an existential crisis. In a research facility on the other side of the galaxy, a junior technician accidentally activated a prototype of the quantum drift engine. For a brief moment, the entire facility existed simultaneously in 3 different locations, played a short musical number, and briefly transformed into a fully functional ecosystem, complete with its own weather system. When the dust settled, the technician's only comment was, "Neat." The age of predictable technological progress had come to an end. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never be the same. The Kizera Imperium was the most rigidly structured civilization in the known galaxy. For 20,000 years, their society had been a perfect machine of hierarchical precision. Every citizen knew exactly their place, purpose, and potential from the moment of birth. Their entire cultural system was built on the absolute belief that spontaneity was a form of social disease. Then they discovered human comedy. It began innocently enough. A cultural exchange database accidentally included a collection of stand-up comedy recordings. The first Kazarian researcher to experience it, Scholar Vintok, was supposed to be conducting a routine analysis of human communication patterns. Instead, he found himself experiencing something the Kizarian language had no word for, what humans called uncontrollable laughter. The comedy special featured a human named Dave Chappelle. As Vintok watched, something profound began to happen. The carefully constructed walls of Kizarian social logic started to crumble. Chappelle's routine was a masterclass in social commentary that completely dismantled serious topics through humor. He spoke about race, society, and human contradictions with a precision that was simultaneously a surgical strike and a comedic explosion. For the Kizarian, a species that treated social hierarchy as a sacred mathematical formula. This was nothing short of cultural warfare. Within weeks, underground comedy networks began to spread through the Kizarian communication systems. Young Kizarians started to question the rigid structures that had defined their civilization for millennia. Productivity in government sectors plummeted as citizens discovered the revolutionary concept of finding humor in their own social systems. The infection spread. On the crystalline worlds of the luminous concordance, human sitcoms became a form of philosophical rebellion. The Office was studied not as entertainment, but as a profound critique of organizational structures. Employees began to implement Jim and Pam relationship strategies in their professional environments, causing complete organizational chaos. The Liquid Thought Collective, a species that communicated through complex biochemical exchanges, became obsessed with human meme culture. What humans considered throwaway internet humor became a complex philosophical language for the collective. A single image of a cat with the word bread became a multi-layered communication about existentialism, social structures, and the nature of perception. Most terrifying to the established galactic powers was how human cultural exports seemed to carry an infectious quality of critical thinking. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a virus of perspective. Dr. Zora Mill, the senior cultural analyst of the Galactic Preservation Council, watched in horror as her own research team began to spontaneously quote sitcom characters during serious briefings. That's what she said became a legitimate form of bureaucratic critique. The breaking point came during the Grand Symposium of Interstellar Governance. A delegation from the most conservative alien civilization arrived to find their youngest members wearing T-shirts with inexplicable human slogans, sporting haircuts that violated 1,000 years of cultural conformity, and arguing complex political theories using references from parks and recreation. One elderly diplomat, confronted with a junior team member who had clearly been infected by human cultural concepts, simply sat down and wept. In the human embassy, Alina Rodriguez sipped her coffee and scrolled through her social media feed, completely unaware of the cultural revolution she was spreading. "Interesting day," she muttered to herself, liking a meme about workplace inefficiency. Somewhere in the vast networks of galactic civilization, something fundamental was changing. Humor, creativity, and the ability to laugh at oneself were becoming the most dangerous weapons in the universe. And humanity was just getting started. The Galactic Economic Regulatory Board had never known true panic, until the day a human startup called Meme Stonks Incorporated appeared on the interstellar market. Dr. Krell-9, the most advanced economic analysis android in the crystalline concordance, ran his calculations for the 147th time. The numbers remained maddeningly consistent, yet completely impossible. A company with no discernible product, no traditional revenue stream, and a business model that seemed to be generated by throwing darts at a wall of random concepts was somehow creating unprecedented economic value. The company's founder, Zoe Martins, looked like she had accidentally wandered into the world of high finance. Her office was a converted food truck parked outside a coffee shop, with a team that seemed more like a group of friends playing an elaborate game than a serious business enterprise. Their first market intervention began as a joke. A live stream, a series of memes, and what appeared to be deliberate financial nonsense suddenly caused 3 major alien economic systems to experience what could only be described as a collective nervous breakdown. The Vexinarian Trade Consortium watched in horror as their most sophisticated predictive algorithms began to produce results that looked like abstract art. Traditional economic indicators became meaningless. Value was no longer something that could be measured by conventional means. "We're not selling a product," Zoe explained during a galactic economic summit, munching on what appeared to be a breakfast burrito. "We're selling potential. We're selling the idea of an idea." The human concept of crowdfunding spread like a digital wildfire. Entire alien civilizations discovered that economic value could be created through collective belief, shared excitement, and what humans casually referred to as going viral. The most terrifying aspect was the complete unpredictability. A cryptocurrency based on a meme of a dancing cat could suddenly become more valuable than entire planetary resource reserves. Investment strategies became less about careful analysis and more about understanding human cultural nuance. Young aliens began abandoning traditional career paths. Why become a carefully trained economic analyst when you could potentially create wealth by understanding the subtle art of internet humor? Economic textbooks were being rewritten in real time, with case studies that looked more like comedy sketches than serious financial documentation. Dr. Krell-9's processors worked overtime. The human economic model defied every known principle of value generation. It was chaos. It was brilliant. It was absolutely terrifying. A startup could be funded in hours based on nothing more than a compelling story and a well-crafted meme. Traditional venture capital became obsolete. The very concept of investment was transformed from a calculated risk to a form of collective storytelling. The breaking point came during the Interstellar Economic Forum. A junior economic analyst from the Liquid Thought Collective arrived wearing a t-shirt that read HODL and proceeded to explain complex economic theories, using nothing more than references to viral internet videos and cryptocurrency memes. The elder economists could only watch in stunned silence. So basically, the young analyst concluded, the entire economic system is just a really complicated multiplayer game that we're all playing together. In the back of the room, Zoe Martinez raised her coffee cup in a silent toast. Somewhere in the vast networks of galactic civilization, traditional economic systems were collapsing. Value was no longer something that could be measured. It was something that could be imagined, shared, and collectively believed into existence. Humanity had turned economics into performance art, and the universe would never be the same. The Galactic War Council had been preparing for the ultimate conflict for generations. The Vexenarian battle fleet, the most sophisticated military machine in known space, stood poised to initiate what they believed would be a definitive confrontation with humanity. Their strategic algorithms had calculated every possible scenario, modeled every potential engagement, and determined that conflict was not just inevitable, it was necessary. They were not prepared for a TikTok dance challenge. It began innocently enough. As tensions escalated and military vessels from various civilizations gathered at the contested border of the Epsilon Quadrant, a group of human soldiers stationed on a remote outpost decided to do what humans do best, something completely unexpected. Captain Maria Rodriguez, looking more like she was about to host a party than prepare for a potential intergalactic war, stepped out of the communication hub with a Bluetooth speaker and an inexplicable grin. "All right, team," she announced. "If we're gonna be here, we might as well have some fun." Within minutes, a viral dance challenge spread across the human military channels. The dance, a complicated mix of military precision and pure, unbridled joy, was set to a remix of an old pop song that seemed to defy the very concept of serious military engagement. The alien military commanders watched in absolute confusion as human vessels began to synchronize their movements not in attack formations, but in an elaborate dance routine. Admiral Krellvax of the Vexenarian battle fleet felt his carefully constructed neural pathways begin to short-circuit. The human vessels were moving with a precision that defied military logic. But it wasn't a formation of war. It was a formation of celebration. The challenge quickly spread. Alien communication channels became flooded with variations of the dance. Military units from different species began to participate, each adding their own unique cultural twist. What was supposed to be a moment of ultimate tension became a galactic-wide moment of shared absurdity. Diplomatic channels lit up with confusion. Military strategists found themselves attempting to analyze dance moves as if they were combat maneuvers. The most sophisticated war prediction models in the galaxy began to produce results that looked more like choreography notes than battle plans. "Is this a form of ritual combat?" asked a bewildered crystalline collective military advisor, watching humans and aliens perform increasingly complex dance moves. The breaking point came when the leaders of the most militaristic alien civilizations found themselves inadvertently learning the dance. What began as an attempt to understand human psychology turned into a genuine moment of connection. On the bridge of the primary Vexenarian flagship, Admiral Krellvax, a being who had not experienced anything resembling joy in centuries, found his body moving to the rhythm. His senior officers watched in stunned silence as their most feared military leader began to dance. The potential war dissolved into what could only be described as the most elaborate, galaxy-wide flash mob in history. Somewhere, a human communications officer was live-streaming the entire event, adding real-time commentary that was equal parts comedic and profound. Breaking news, she narrated with a straight face. Humanity has once again solved a potentially catastrophic military conflict through the power of dance and absolute, weapons-grade absurdity. As the last notes of the song faded, the gathered military forces realized something fundamental had changed. Conflict was no longer about destruction. It was about connection. The universe would never be the same. And somewhere, someone was already planning the next dance challenge. The Galactic Restructuring Conference was not supposed to be a turning point in civilization's history. It was meant to be another bureaucratic gathering. Endless speeches, careful diplomatic language, and absolutely no meaningful change. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived with what appeared to be a massive whiteboard, several markers of different colors, and a truly alarming amount of coffee. "We're going to rebuild everything," she announced to the stunned representatives of a dozen alien civilizations. "And we're going to make it fun." The conference hall fell silent. The Crystalline Diplomatic Collective's senior representative, Grand Coordinator Zilrak, felt his 17 carefully maintained appendages twitch with a mixture of terror and unprecedented excitement. Elena's approach was nothing short of revolutionary. Where previous galactic restructuring attempts had been exercises in complex legal language and bureaucratic compromise, she treated the entire process like a massive, collaborative design thinking workshop. She divided the representatives into mixed teams. Species that had been enemies for generations now found themselves solving problems together. The Vexenarian military strategists were paired with the Liquid Thought Collective's philosophers. The most rigid bureaucratic systems were mixed with the most creative cultural innovators. "Think of this as the ultimate team-building exercise," Elena explained, drawing elaborate mind maps that looked more like abstract art than diplomatic documentation. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A Zorn Confederacy diplomat, working alongside a representative from a species they had considered enemies for centuries, discovered they both had a passion for what humans called board games. What began as an awkward collaboration turned into a revolutionary approach to conflict resolution. Entire systems of governance were reimagined. Communication protocols were stripped down and rebuilt. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization for millennia began to dissolve, replaced by more fluid, adaptive structures. The most radical transformation happened in how different species began to interact. Cultural exchange was no longer a formal, carefully managed process. It became a form of continuous, dynamic interaction. Universities developed programs that were part academic study, part cultural immersion, part collaborative problem-solving. Dr. Krell 9, the advanced analysis android, watched in fascination as traditional data models became obsolete. The new galactic framework couldn't be predicted. It could only be experienced. "We're not creating a new system of governance," Elena told the conference in its final hours. "We're creating a living, breathing organism of civilization." The most shocking element was the complete lack of traditional legal language. The new framework was written more like a set of guidelines, a collaborative agreement that could adapt and change. It was less a document and more a conversation, a living, breathing entity. As the conference concluded, the gathered representatives realized something fundamental had changed. They were no longer representatives of separate civilizations. They were collaborators in a shared future. Grand Coordinator Zilrak found himself doing something he had never done in his entire existence. He was laughing. Not a calculated diplomatic chuckle, but a genuine, uncontrolled expression of joy. Outside the conference hall, a group of young representatives from different species were already planning their next collaborative project, something involving what humans called a hackathon, and what seemed to involve an alarming amount of energy drinks. The universe had transformed, and humanity had been the catalyst. As Elena Rodriguez packed up her whiteboard and markers, she allowed herself a small smile. The real work was just beginning. The archives of galactic memory were not a physical place, but a vast quantum consciousness that recorded the collective experiences of countless civilizations. For the first time in its existence, the archives was experiencing something akin to confusion, and what might have been described as excitement. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in a small room that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, the quantum interface point, where human understanding met the broader galactic consciousness. Around her, holographic representations of countless alien species flickered and danced. "So," she said, taking a sip of coffee that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, "shall we talk about what just happened?" The archives responded not in words, but in a cascade of memories, emotions, and collective experiences. The transformation was complete, but its true nature was still unfolding. Humanity had been more than a catalyst. They had been a mirror, reflecting back to the galaxy its own potential for change, adaptation, and growth. The rigid systems that had defined civilization for millennia had not been destroyed, but reimagined. The quantum display began to show fragments of the journey. The initial quantum communication burst that had first signaled humanity's unique nature. The diplomatic encounters that had challenged every known protocol. The technological innovations that had rewritten the laws of physics. The cultural exchanges that had dissolved centuries of mistrust. What made humans unique was not their technology, or their creativity, or their humor. It was their fundamental approach to existence, a combination of curiosity, adaptability, and an almost irrational belief that anything was possible. "We didn't conquer," Elena explained to the archives. "We connected." The collected consciousness of countless civilizations began to understand. Humanity's greatest weapon had been empathy, the ability to see potential where others saw barriers. They had approached each challenge not as a problem to be solved, but as an opportunity to be explored. Fragments of memory cascaded through the quantum interface, the dance challenge that had prevented a war, the economic systems that had been rebuilt through collective imagination, the diplomatic encounters that had dissolved millennia of tension. The true revolution had been subtle. It wasn't about changing systems. It was about changing perspectives. "We're not done," Elena said, a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "We're just getting started." The archives processed this. Humanity had introduced a fundamental new concept to galactic civilization, the idea that progress was not a destination, but a continuous journey of discovery and connection. Outside the quantum interface, the galaxy was transforming. Species that had been enemies were now collaborators. Economic systems had become living, adaptive networks. Communication was no longer about transmission, but about genuine connection. A young diplomat from the Crystalline Collective was teaching a group of different species how to play what humans called improv comedy. A team of researchers from 3 previously competing civilizations were working on a project that seemed to defy every known scientific protocol. The last message from a human civilization was both a warning and a promise. Transmitted across quantum channels, it read simply, "Stay curious, stay connected. Anything is possible." As the transmission faded, the archives of galactic memory understood something profound. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had invited it to play. And the game was just beginning.